Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Fun and Games Podcast. I'm Geoff Moonen.
And I'm Matt, a.k.a. Stormageddon.
And another E3 has come and gone. I wanted to try to say the entire name of it, and it blanked on me for a second. Electronic Entertainment Expo, I believe is what it is.
I think so, yeah. Something like that.
I was going to stumble over it, but another E3 has come and gone, ladies and gentlemen. And, we wanted to take a little bit of time and not necessarily dissect the thing. Enough of the internet has dissected every second, every frame, every morsel and piece of the E3 presentations that have gone on. We want to take a look at the bigger state of it and where it sits in the timeline of gaming, I think.
Yeah, I think that, and we discussed this briefly on the last episode, I'm more interested in discussing the conferences and how they've evolved and how they've changed and how some of these developers have their own conferences now and how the major console creators, Xbox, PlayStation, and Nintendo, have also changed. I just think it's important because we could do our hot takes, as it were, or as the dinosaur machines like to say, they're hot cakes. But the reality is it's been several weeks since it already, and the big announcements have been flooded all over the internet. I've shared some of it on our Facebook page, but the reality is there's no way to cover it all, and as Geoff said, the internet has probably already done a better job than we will getting into the nitty-gritty.
Yeah, it's not what we're about.
So, but let's go in order of the conferences. And so the first major conference of E3 2018 was Microsoft. They started off that weekend of madness. And what was interesting to me about the Xbox 3 or Xbox One, I suppose now, conference is that Microsoft, for the most part, followed the same formula as previous years, but brought a lot of really great games from other publishers that lended their strength. You know, they had a Halo trailer, they had a new Gears of War trailer, but they also had games like Devil May Cry 5, returning to the original series of Devil May Cry games and not continuing with the rebooted series, which is a Capcom game that's going to be multi-platform. But the fact that Xbox got the announcement was pretty cool. But for the most part, they didn't try anything revolutionary with their conference. It was fairly run-of-the-mill, their typic, here's the thing, here's another thing, we're going to talk about the future, here's another thing.
Yeah, it was a bit of a, it has been said in previous generations, and it has become a refrain that it's sort of that line where consoles are becoming indistinguishable from computers in a lot of ways. And I feel Microsoft is really ahead of the game in blurring that line. I mean, last year they announced the new Xbox One X.
Yeah.
And this year they're already announcing new pushes to the hardware. And they were... I mean, again, I am going to cards on the table. I don't have a certain fanboyism for any one particular company, but out of all of the major consoles, Xbox has always been the one I've been coldest on. So they've really got to wow me to be like, oh man, that's like, okay, I'm on board for this. And it just feels a little bit like they were really shouting for relevancy.
Yeah, I mean, announcing that new consoles are in the works, like, okay, great. We figured as much. You don't even really have to tell us that. It's kind of assumed. I mean, they announced 50 new games, which is a lot, and a ton of them were exclusives. I mean, they also already announced DLC for Cuphead, which was huge. Like I said before, Devil May Cry.
Yeah.
But for the most...
The Battletoads stuff, too.
Yeah, but just... Like, my problem with the Battletoads announcement, while I'm excited for new Battletoads, is that it's the classic, here's a logo announcement, which every publisher is guilty of. But it's like, I want to be excited, but I have no information here to go on other than there's a new Battletoads. And it's harder for me to get excited about that just because they could change it. Like the last time we were excited about a new Banjo-Kazooie game and it ended up being that stupid
nuts and bolts. Yeah.
So, that's the kind of stuff I worry about when there's no gameplay. But yeah, no, and of course Gears 5 looked pretty. I didn't play Gears 4, but I liked the older ones. And so, I mean, that one I'm sure will be solid. They got to show off Kingdom Hearts at theirs. Square Enix didn't have their own conference. They kind of just featured their own stuff. Oh, no, wait, they did have their own conference, but it came later. They allowed some of the bigger titles to be featured elsewhere.
Right. And I mean, they definitely have acquired a couple of good studios in-house. I mean, they got Ninja Theory now. And so it's kind of nice that they're able to be like, okay, here's some cool stuff we're putting out.
Yeah.
And I guess they had the virtue of being the first one.
Yeah.
Because again, Nintendo does their own thing, and individual development companies are going to be talking about their own projects. But between Microsoft and Sony, it's sort of first one to the gun as far as we've got this as well, because it'll be on both of them if it's not an exclusive.
Yeah, I think the biggest reveal to come out of the Xbox conference was Cyberpunk 2077, because it's CD Projekt Red, who did the Witcher games. They're a great development house, and they always, while they release multi-platform, they have a strong partnership with Xbox and with PC. So they, of course, got showed off at Microsoft. I mean, just based on the name, a Cyberpunk game sounds really cool. But again, the details on it were minimal. We didn't get gameplay footage until after E3. And so I think for the most part, this was the most boring conference for me. Not only because I've been cold on Xbox as of late, but also because the conference was fairly straightforward. There was nothing for me to get really excited about, because anything I was excited about, I probably wasn't going to buy, like Gears of War 5, which looked cool, but I didn't really care that much.
Yeah, and it's also that fact of it's kind of a sorry state of affairs, I guess, that we can sit here and go, yeah, they announced a lot of new games, they announced some forward stuff, but it really wasn't all that interesting. And if it were its own announcement on its own, it would be great. It would be phenomenal. But we have created this greater context of E3. This dog and pony, ballyhoo, P.T. Barnum, greatest show on earth kind of thing, where if you're not changing the game about changing the game, then why are we even here? But we're all expected to be here. And so Microsoft was just kind of the pace car the whole way through.
Yeah, I think that, and we'll talk about this more when we get to Nintendo, but I think Microsoft suffers from a few things. One, their heads of industry are not terrible speakers, but they're not super charismatic. Like, there's only one Reggie Fils-Aimé, and I think one of the things that I love about Nintendo's press conferences and updates in general is that Reggie is always excited and is a great personality. Whereas Xbox, it just wasn't that outstanding for me. Like, they were there and they were excited, but I just didn't get sucked in. But now I think we can shift on to the first developer conference and presentation, which was Bethesda Studios. Now, Bethesda, of course, famously head by Todd Howard, and who is a larger-than-life character like our one Reggie Fils-Aimé, was very excited and had a lot of interesting things to announce. I think that the thing that I thought was really great is that they had a good sense of humor about themselves, which already
Very
made the
much so.
conference interesting. Like the very, very special edition of Skyrim.
Oh my God, yeah.
The commercial they filmed with Keegan-Michael Key about
Having Skyrim in your fridge and
debuting on Alexa and other voice devices, and then eventually coming to fridges and other thing, making fun of the fact that they've been releasing Skyrim everywhere. The fun thing was that then they did release an Alexa app that did do what the commercial showed, and you can play a short version of the story, quote unquote, choosing decisions by talking to Alexa, which I thought was fun. But they had some announcements in serious places too. They're diving deeper into mobile gaming again. They started with Fallout Shelter. They're now bringing Elder Scrolls Blades, which looked interesting, but I'm still not quite sure how I feel about it. I mean, the reality is for me, and we've talked about this on the show, I'm not a mobile gamer. Phone games, I lose interest. I keep trying to get back into Pokemon Go because of the new Pokemon games.
yeah, me too.
And I can't, though. I don't play it regularly enough. And so that looked cool, and I have signed up to try and beta test it. But the reality is, I don't know if I'll get into it because, again, none of those games can ever hold my attention. But it did look pretty cool from what they showed.
It's a good idea, and they've in the past, with Fallout Shelter, they've had great success on that front. So it's not untested waters for them. I'm with you, Matt, in terms of I'm not a big phone gamer. I'm definitely a big handheld gamer. And I recently realized I have an Android phone, and I've bought enough Humble bundles that have Android versions that I should start gaming on my phone. But that's a work in progress. I tried starting my Pokemon Go account up again, and I couldn't remember my login, and then went, well, guess I'm not doing it. Because I'm old and easily frustrated. And I do know I have several friends for whom Fallout Shelter is a perennial distraction and a great deal of fun. So I think they got the right track on that. I mean, I think a lot of different companies, a lot of different developers want to have that level of top to bottom integration, certainly between franchises and across platforms. And say what you will about Bethesda, but they definitely have a far reach. And for the people who are into what they do, you can always find a way to engage in that world. And Todd Howard is very aware of his memes, which is kind of nice because E3 is now mostly for the internet rather than the people there, it seems. And so it should be nice that, when you gaze into the abyss, the abyss also gazes back.
Yeah, I think that, with the Rage 2 announcements and Andrew WK being all over the commercial and having him perform live was a fun nod to that. And, Andrew WK always puts on a great show. I think that, a lot of gamers had a mixed reaction to it, though, because, like, concerts don't normally mix with it. And, like, when they bring in celebrities or known figures to conferences like this, sometimes it falls flat. But I think for the
It's
most
hot or cold, yeah.
Right. But that said, they had a lot of really great announcements. Doom Eternal, which is the sequel to the re-release of Doom that they did a few years back. Starfield, which is the first science fiction open world game that they're going to try and do. And it's their first new franchise in 25 years. So it's not going to be, steampunky post-nuclear war like Fallout. And it's not going to be fantasy like Elder Scrolls. It's going to be its own thing, Starfield, which is interesting. The hilarity that ensued afterwards is all of the Garfield Starfield mashups that I've seen on the internet, which is fun. Fallout 76, of course, got featured more.
And Country Road got stuck in everybody's head.
Everybody's head. And
now it's back.
But the thing I think I hated most about their conference, and it's a flaw of this conference, and I think conferences in general, is they revealed Elder Scrolls 6. And by revealing it, they showed the words Elder Scrolls 6 over a forest. And people got really excited, but in my head, I'm like, well, of course they're working on Elder Scrolls 6. Like, that's a given. It's their biggest franchise. They have to be working on it.
And it's nice that we live in a world where that's a given, but still.
Yeah, I don't know. The habit at E3, and it's picked up more and more over the recent years, of showing an image and that being good enough, it infuriates me. I want more to go on than that. Like, you can release that picture online. Like last year when Nintendo announced Metroid Prime 4 and they just showed the picture. Like, it's exciting, but...
Yeah, and it's exciting and for something like Metroid Prime, where we haven't heard hide nor hair for a number of years, it's a nice acknowledgement. But you're right, for Bethesda, Elder Scrolls is their bread and butter. They don't have while they have a great stable of franchises, they don't have the bevy that Nintendo has. So you bet they're gonna keep hammering away at all of them pretty equally.
Yeah, and so I wish that trope of showing an image and that being an exciting enough announcement would kind of vanish. I don't think it will, because at the end of the day, they want to get the internet in a frenzy because, as you said, that's who these conferences are for. And so they're just trying to rile them up. And while showing sequels to Wolfenstein and Doom, which are huge, even words can excite fans if they know that for sure it's in development.
Right. And I think this is, again, getting into some of the issues that I have, and I think you might have too, with what E3 has become.
Yeah.
I mean, we talked last episode about that idea of previews, of trailers, of teaser images. And E3 is kind of like I don't know, it's the country fair of showing this stuff off. I'm trying to think of it'll take me a minute. I'll come up with a good reference to where it's just like this required. All right, show me what you got.
Yeah.
Like, you got to get your grade on where your work is right now, but it doesn't have to be finished. Where we exist in a very connected age where we don't need to necessarily stream these things all at the same time from the same conference area. Nintendo Directs exist. People are able to put up scant images on their Twitter, and people can decipher it through everybody poking away at it within 12 hours. the fans will make the announcement for themselves if you only give them a little bit.
Yeah.
So you're right. Like putting up just a teaser image like that is almost it I don't want to call it insulting, but it feels a little old fashioned.
Yeah. No, I agree. All right, well, let's move on to another developer conference. So, of course, Square Enix had their own conference, and it's all the games you expected to see at it.
Oh yeah.
Of course, the main attraction was Kingdom Hearts 3. They showed off some worlds, some battles, some more plot.
Did they show anything besides Kingdom Hearts 3?
I mean, they must have, but not that I can recall off the top of my head. And that's, I think, the
Right?
biggest problem with Square Enix's conference is that and they've actually come out and said this recently. Some of the game developers have said they're announcing some of their franchises too soon. I think they previewed Octopath Traveler.
They did
And
Octopath Traveler. I know they did some Tomb Raider.
yes, they revealed the newest Tomb Raider, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, I believe.
Tomb Raider. Yes.
And yeah, but with Kingdom Hearts being so exciting to have released, I mean, they did announce the release date, which is January of next year, which is very exciting. And I really want to get that game because I'm still into the hype, even though I shouldn't be by now.
And yet.
But again, I think my biggest problem with Square Enix's conference is that it was so unmemorable, and I think it's because they are leaning so hard into Kingdom Hearts which is from a marketing standpoint makes sense because it's one of the most anticipated games in RPG history.
And certainly in recent memory, which may as well be history.
Right. And so that makes sense, but they unfortunately overshadowed everything else because nothing else got the same look that did.
Yeah. Well, and again, it's that same idea of kind of like what I just said about Elder Scrolls 6 versus Metroid Prime 4.
Yeah.
Kingdom Hearts 3 is that thing where it's just like, all right, it's a new Kingdom Hearts game. Is it Kingdom Hearts 3? Nope. It's Kingdom Hearts Dream Drop Dawn. It's a Kingdom Hearts 3? Nope. It's Kingdom Hearts 2.9. This is a re-release of 2.8, and this is the HD remix, and it, like, Capcom could not do this shit.
Yeah.
And, like, they never tried. So for it to be Kingdom Hearts 3, honestly, Square they could have just kept it at Kingdom Hearts 3, and I think the internet would have had just as much of a meltdown without feeling like they were giving anything else the shaft.
Yeah, I think that, and Nintendo on theirs, which we'll get to, they did focus on Octopath Traveler as well, so I feel like they could have just let that be. I mean, there's been some crossover with the conferences, which is always good to talk about that. But, I think for the most part, getting in and getting out, doing a rapid fire of a couple of big games, making some announcements, and then moving on is the best way to do these conferences. To drag it out or to try and unbalance it just to feel like you have enough gets heavy and gets weighted and boring.
Yeah, and sometimes it's what you don't say that's more important than what you do. Like, again, we know what games are coming and aren't coming in a lot of ways because announcements are made, information is leaked, whether intentionally or unintentionally, and the line between that is blurred so very often. So while you may have okay, all of these games are coming out, but this one's going to get the big reaction, well, then let's just make it about this. That feels lopsided, and that feels like you're doing the other projects a disservice, but I feel they're doing a bigger disservice by having them share space.
Let's move on to the next developer conference, which was EA, publisher, I guess at this point, developer, publisher. So EA is a company that's I've been burned out on for a little bit.
Yeah, same.
And the problem is, it's not completely their fault. Like, they have a new Madden and a new FIFA, and those are going to sell well, and I know people who love those games, and that's fine and well and good. Anthem, though, I was excited at first when they announced Anthem and Destiny 2 at the same time, but playing Destiny 2 and it not living up even to Destiny 1, and now a year or two later they're trying to patch it into a better game, I'm kind of burned out on online shooters and MMOs to begin with. So, while Anthem still seems cool to fly around in an exosuit, it's one of those games that I may just have to wait and see, and I just didn't really care that much about. They announced a new Star Wars game that's set between episodes 3 and 4. In theory, that could be great, but I'm already fatigued with Star Wars games because I hated the first new Battlefront. I still haven't played the second new Battlefront. And this game, I'm just afraid it's going to be an excuse to get out another Battlefront-esque multiplayer that has a short campaign attached to it. Like, I'm hoping it's campaign focused, and from what I'm reading, it is. But the reality is, I never know with EA because they shoehorn multiplayer into everything.
Yeah, and again, at the expense of single player, there is, you and I and so many other folks have said so many things about microtransactions and DLC and all sorts of paywalls. I feel like EA has, in the last year or so, certainly very much embodied the worst of it.
Yeah.
Like, they are truly looking at properties as revenue streams. And that is at the expense of a single player experience. That is at the expense of a gaming experience besides, can we put PUBG style, can we put Fortnite, can we put Battle Royale into, which games can take that? Which ones can, we want people coming back to play it all the time and etc. We want to set it and forget it and just collect the dollars, which, okay, this is capitalism and this is a business, but that's a race to the bottom if there ever was one.
Yeah, I mean, they did announce a program that sounds like it might save their online system Origin. They're doing an Origin Access Premier, which is essentially Netflix for the EA games, which I can see how that's a great idea, but a lot of these games eventually end up in other places, so I don't know. That sounds like it's something that's for PC users, of course, and it could be great, but I'm hesitant to pay for that kind of access. It depends all on the cost. I will say one thing about EA that they did right this year, and it came after the conference. Battlefield 5, of course, controversially because nerds suck, is starring a female protagonist that people were outraged about. But EA as a company stepped up and pretty much told all the haters and whiners to be quiet, which I'm super thankful for. They could have easily rolled back on their business model of what the majority of white elder males do and just, try and appease them. But they didn't. They stood their ground. They said, there's nothing wrong with the female protagonist. This is the game. Like it or don't play it.
What's wrong is your worldview.
Yeah.
And no, you're absolutely right. They did a lot to garner some goodwill, certainly in my book, by doing that. You're right.
Yeah. But that said, their conference was still fairly straightforward and stale. But then again, if you're an EA fan, that might be just what you want. I mean, again, like the Xbox conference for me, and it sounds like for you, because we're not super into most of their franchises. And, Mass Effect is more or less nowhere to be found at the moment because the last one tanked so hard.
Yeah, it did.
I think that we might just be more exhausted than the average player. Again, if you're a huge FIFA fan, then the trailer for FIFA 19 probably looked amazing because all of those sports games look realistic and amazing. So,
and EA's always been good at that. So, yeah.
But, for me personally, I just wasn't jazzed by it. And speaking of not being jazzed by publishers, Ubisoft was the next one, and we've discussed at length my frustrations with Ubisoft and their yearly releases and how they pretty much killed their own franchises with Assassin's Creed for me. However, seeing the trailer for Odyssey, I mean, it looked really cool. Like, it's hard for me to want to get back into a franchise that I felt I was burned by, but it did look really cool. And that's something I think Ubisoft did do fairly well this year, is that, and they've done well in the past now that they've been partnering more with Nintendo and they've been trying to relaunch some stuff from their past. They've kind of dialed back into the gamer, and they did a lot of the punch for punch, here's a game. They showed a longer story trailer for Beyond Good and Evil 2 showing that it's a prequel. They showed a cinematic trailer for Skull and Bones, which is their new pirate game that they're working on. And then the big one was Starlink with Battle for Atlas, which is this interesting looking space combat fighter that is going to come out on Nintendo Switch as well as the other consoles, but the Nintendo Switch version will allow you to play as Team Star Fox.
Which is, Star Fox fans have been wanting a good Star Fox game for... When did Star Fox 64 come out?
A long time ago.
Since then? I mean, Star Fox Assault, No, Star Fox Assault was the one for that was GameCube.
Yes.
Because there was Adventures and Assault. Assault wasn't terrible. And then, wow, I am blanking on the one on the Wii
So there
U.
were two on the 3DS. One was a new game that was more like a strategy game, and then one was a re-release of Star Fox 64. Star Fox Zero was the one on the
Star
Wii
Fox
U,
Zero, that's
which was
right.
another re-release of Star Fox 64.
It sort of
Well,
was,
sort
but
of,
it
yeah.
also had an updated control scheme that people hated. I am actually fairly okay with it. I'm mostly ambivalent. But yeah, the Starlink announcement was definitely Ubisoft's big one.
Yeah, I would say though the only thing that worries me about Starlink is it's a MacGuffin game. It's like the HeroClix and I know that's wrong, Skylanders and all of the games that require you to buy extra stuff. Battle for Atlantis, to use certain ships, you have to buy the MacGuffin ship. I think the Nintendo version is going to come with the Star Fox ship, the R-wing,
Yeah, most likely.
but like I don't want to buy, like I'm barely trying to keep up with amiibos and now I have to buy something else that's not an amiibo. Like if they just sold an R-wing amiibo that did stuff in the other games and that game, it'd be a different story, but this is a whole different thing, and so yeah, I don't know. But the game definitely looked cool, and I was definitely like, they didn't rely on having a huge laundry list of announcements. You know, they announced,
They had like 8 or so strong
yeah, they
ones.
had, you know, and they were focused.
hmm Now, granted, at this point, I'm bored with Assassin's Creed, but that's me.
Right. Well, and like I said, I am too, but Odyssey looked the coolest of any of the ones I've seen. So I'm curious, but again, I don't know that I would actually play
And hey, I liked the last Odyssey game so much. You know, when it
it.
starts Super Mario. So maybe these Greek assassins, maybe those assassins have got something here. I don't
I
know.
mean, I did think that was very funny talking about how Odyssey is going to be the new and whatever game.
And Knuckles.
Yeah, and Knuckles, right. They also did announce, and we knew this was coming out, their full campaign expansion for Mario and Rabbids Kingdom Battle, which is Donkey Kong focused, and it's a separate story with the Peach Rabbid, Donkey Kong, and a Cranky Kong Rabbid, which I thought was very cute. I didn't finish it, but I loved the original base game, so I'm interested in eventually getting the DLC. I think that Ubisoft teaming up, even though I was never a huge fan of the Rabbids, the comedy works really well in the Mario universe, and so I'm all for them making more stuff like that.
Mario definitely. And Mario and Donkey Kong have lended themselves to that like non-verbal comedy. So adding the like absurd level of slapstick that the rabbits have. It's rabbits on their own. They don't exist well in a vacuum. And I know that they were a piggyback off of Rayman, but it was, I don't know, it was the minions growing too big for Despicable Me, and that was pointless anyway. It's having something grounded for them to bounce off of, which, yeah. And I guess my big upset with Ubisoft was the hit record crowdsourcing of assets for Beyond Good and Evil 2, which if you look at it on paper or if it's explained in a nice way, it sounds really nice. Like everybody has an opportunity to contribute something to the game. You have a lot of different creators so that it has a multicultural feel and doesn't feel like it's coming from one creator. I work as an independent artist,
Yeah.
and the amount of like, this is beyond pay for play kind of chicanery.
Yeah. I mean, it's a bummer because I like Joseph Gordon-Levitt and I like what Hit Record does, but it does smell fishy to me.
It's on the surface, like you look at it from a distance and it looks really nice. So I'm almost not like upset with any one person, but my God, am I upset about it. So, you know what? We'll see where it
Yeah.
goes. We'll see where it goes.
From here, we go back into the major console giant conferences, and we have Sony's conference. And so let's talk structure first. Sony, for whatever reason, thought it would be a great idea to be in the theater and then in a private set and then back in the theater and then to jump around. It was nonsense. They stopped about halfway through and then finally just started showing us games, and that was great. But like the idea, like I get that they wanted it to feel like a produced special, like it was like some kind of talk show or something. Like it makes sense, but it wasn't produced well. It wasn't smoothly shot, and it just felt very janky to me.
If they had put people in different rooms and like, okay, you're in 3 or 4 different rooms, and whatever room you're in, you're gonna get 1 live thing and 3 pre-taped things, or 3 not pre-taped, but 3, on the screen things. Sure, whatever, that's a little weird, but again, there are I don't know the numbers of how many people streamed E3 versus attended E3. And it's one thing if you are in a live experience and you need to move, whatever. You also get the fun of talking with everybody around you. You get to digest it a bit. But if you are streaming this, if you're watching it on your TV, if you're watching it on your laptop, it's something that you've got on while you've got a break at work. And then you have to wait for them to move it all around. It is a severe loss of momentum, which is a shame because Sony had some really good stuff to announce, and the pieces of production value they used were nice, but they almost oversold production elements at the expense of convenience.
And so let's talk about the games a little bit. For one, I hadn't been really that excited about Sony's stuff in a while, and I have a PS4, and I think it's just because I was kind of overwhelmed by some of the original stuff and didn't know quite what to do with it. I finally, as I've said previously, started playing Horizon Zero Dawn, and I love it. And so that's gotten me back into the PS4 groove, as it were. But everything I've seen about the new Marvel Spider-Man game, the original story, new characters that have never been featured in a game before, combat mechanics that are akin to Arkham Knight, and some interest, it just looks like we might finally get a Spider-Man game to rival Spider-Man 2 for the PlayStation. And I'm very excited about it. I think that they're also giving it to a studio who's been developing for Sony for so long that it made sense. But the in-engine cutscenes they showed at the conference and then the fluid jump into combat and back into the cinematic stuff. A lot of people were upset about the QuickTime events, but what I like about it is that it's not a chain of QuickTime events. It's in-moment button reactions that then you don't have to keep doing. You just get to watch the thing, and that's it. And so I thought overall, for me, that was the big standout and the one I was most excited about.
I'm definitely very excited about. The thing I was not expecting, because I didn't even know it was coming, was the Ghost of Tsushima.
Yes.
That one was like the surprise thing that blew me away. I also have a soft spot for samurai games and samurai style stuff. It's that is I don't know. It scratches an itch for me, and the way they had it set up and the way that it all changed during the boss encounter and just the sheer depth of environment that it had. In the same way that the Insomniac Spider-Man game, like, it feels more like a living, breathing world. It feels more connected. It feels, all of the Arkham City, Arkham Knight stuff, now is in the Marvel Universe and in a completely different realm in New York City. That old, Edo period Japan, I was super excited about it. And, having the musician Cornelius Boots there, playing on I am blanking on the name of the flute, but it is a special, it was very nice. They didn't need to have all of the set dressing necessarily. Like, they had a really good idea when they opened with The Last of Us 2 and having the banjo.
Yeah.
And when they used the flute for Ghost of Tsushima, the music will take you so far in these sort of settings. Like, we all understand that you have a big bare stage that you're going to be showing some crazy light shows. You can do a lot with light. As somebody who's worked in theater production, you can do so much with light. You don't need to drop cherry blossoms on people. I don't remember if they did or not, but they may as well have.
Right.
And, a little bit of music and a little bit of lighting to just set the stage for what you're announcing is very potent.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I feel like Sony had some cool meat to show, but they got so busy decorating the butcher shop.
Yeah, and I think for me, like, the biggest standout confusion, I suppose, is the continued mystery around Death Stranding. Now, I get the excitement because Hideo Kojima is an incredible developer, and he's an incredible writer and creator. And even though I never loved the Metal Gear Solid stuff, they were quality made games, and I know you do. But my issue with Death Stranding is it's they showed a little bit of gameplay, but weren't quite sure what it meant. The cutscenes still don't make any sense, and I get that he's essentially trying to jerk the community as a whole around as long
Hmm.
as he can, and I have a lot of respect for that. But it makes me have zero interest in the game. It looks cool, it looks impressive. I need context, or I don't care. Like, it's too vague and bizarre for me.
And it'd be better if he did a better job of creating context. Even in Metal Gear Solid games, when what was hyped versus what was released was a huge difference, there was a through line of what he was showing. Fortunately, that was a franchise of his that he had been working on for, 25 years or so. This is a new property, and it's not Silent Hill, and it's not anything of the sort. So I'm not sure. I feel like this is one of those things where context will reveal itself. But as a fan of Kojima, not like a slavish devotee, but as a fan of Kojima, I'm going to give Death Stranding its due. I'll give it a try when it comes out, but I don't know. I don't need to be weirded out for years on end to be interested in the game any more than I already am.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the final conference, which, if you couldn't tell, was already my favorite, which was, of course, Nintendo's Nintendo Direct for E3. Now, here's the thing that I think is brilliant about Nintendo just doing their bi-weekly or bi-monthly or however it's scheduled Nintendo Direct for E3 is you're continuing your pattern, but you're also linking it to E3, but you're not getting caught up in the hype of the theater stuff, and I think that's eventually where we're headed, because the Nintendo Directs are curated directly for the internet, and doing one for E3 continued to be curated directly for the internet, which is what made it feel so successful to me.
And it was a definite statement of, we've already been making great announcements continuously throughout the year, and we're just going to continue that pattern on this stage that you've set where everyone else is putting together their big announcement package. I mean, it's not as if other companies don't make big announcements, but no, Nintendo has their idiosyncratic way. I mean, Nintendo has their idiosyncratic blank. That's just its own Mad Libs.
Yeah.
But this is their idiosyncratic way of making announcements. And so just bringing that as a capsule to it is both a successful showcase as well as just that statement, unspoken statement of, why do we need to be here to do this?
Yeah, and I think also what was really interesting, and they did what we were talking about Square Enix could have done, is they absolutely backloaded it with Smash Brothers Ultimate, which was the big announcement, was its release date, but they did it as a featurette with 15 minutes of behind the scenes stuff, including with developer interviews and talking about specific characters, going over move sets, stages, like really
Yeah.
digging deep. Whereas Kingdom Hearts was just kind of showing off certain areas and combat, but there was not like a through line narrative documentary style to it. But we'll get to that in a sec. So of course they announced some other stuff. The cool thing was
Fortnite.
Fortnite. I'm not into Fortnite, but I have downloaded it on the Switch because I want to try it. But the cool thing is that they announced it that day, that it was going to be in the eShop that day, and sure enough, it was. It runs really well on my Switch. The little bit I've looked at it, I think having it as a portable option is really cool. If it can be successful on phones, it can be successful on the Switch. Of course, they talked more about Pokemon Let's Go, which we already had an announcement on, but gave us some more details, talked about the release date again.
Yeah, they announced it early enough so that we had time to digest it. Then they could go, okay, now that the initial shock is gone, here's a little more about it.
Yeah. The my favorite thing about them announcing the way they did is that they also got to reveal Super Mario Party, which is the first main franchise Mario Party game to come out in a while. And the interesting thing for me about that is the tech that they showed. The fact that you can take two Switches, put them next to each other, and characters were moving between the screens. That's fascinating, because then I wonder, well, can you play those mini games if you don't have two screens? Is it only an option if you have two screens? Is it just an add-on if you have two screens? Like, I have so many questions, but I'm actually really intrigued because it's such a unique use of it's essentially making it into an on-the-table board game.
Yeah.
which is essentially what it was from the beginning anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And now it's just, again, the line's getting blurred. And I mean, when the Switch was first announced, one of the things I was curious about was, given that it of its nature as a handheld device, that question of, well, if you have a household that has multiple 3DSs, is it going to be a household that has multiple Switches? This is the first time that I've seen anything. I may be wrong, and there maybe already be stuff that has the idea of multiple Switches being engaged in gameplay like this.
Yeah.
I mean, I know you got like Mario Kart and things like that, but one where it's like a direct, let's utilize all of it as one big thing.
Yeah. Also the potential for Mario Party to be multiplayer online, that would make me buy it instantly.
Oh, yeah.
Like, because none of the other Mario parties had that. It was all local co-op, which is great, and I love local co-op, but if there's an opportunity to also play online with your friends, I would totally be into it.
Yeah, and a game like Mario Party, it has single player, local multiplayer foundations already. And then saying we're adding online multiplayer isn't at the expense of the design of the game already. I mean, and Mario Party is a great franchise for the first party developers of the Nintendo Switch to showcase and play and experiment with all the configurations of Joy-Cons and tablet screens and everything else as you can, because it's a collection of mini games. If it doesn't work one way, you have it another way. If you have these, it can make that happen. No one aspect of the game is hinged on a specific configuration.
Yeah.
It's mini games, and that's always been its bread and butter. They released a 3DS game that was the 100 best mini games. Like, that's Mario Party. So yeah, absolutely.
Of course, they announced Overcooked 2, which Overcooked is one of, if you've not played, one of the best party games ever made. It's just fast paced, a lot of fun. Your chef's in a kitchen, and it's brilliantly done. It's by Team 17, and it sounds like Overcooked 2 might be a Switch exclusive upon launch and then go elsewhere, which I think is great. They've definitely embraced the indie community, so that totally makes sense. They, of course, announced the first full-fledged, full-release Fire Emblem game, Fire Emblem Three Houses, for the Switch, which is huge news because Fire Emblem is huge overseas, but only now really gaining traction in the States, and it's a big news for them to be having a title on the Switch, because there's a huge love of it here now because of the 3DS games that had come out and the Wii U game, and then of course them doing Fire Emblem Heroes last year.
Yeah, the 3DS games were a definite turning point, I feel, for a lot of picking up a lot of North American fans. There was a small but strong Fire Emblem audience ever since the GameCube era. And yeah, they've definitely poised themselves to have a big release and have it really land well. So it's very exciting to see what comes of what that Fire Emblem will be. And on a sillier side of things, I'm excited about Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes coming out on the Switch.
Yeah. That's
which is a great party game. Yeah, and it's again one of those things that, like, wow, yeah, that is really well suited to something like the Switch. Great. No, I'm excited to see where this goes. It's a goofy game. It's been out for a long time. I would love to play it in this configuration. It's something you can take with you.
Yeah, for sure. Now, of course, the big announcement was Smash Brothers Ultimate, which has a December release date. And the biggest announcement, which was delivered by Sakurai himself. And the fact that Sakurai was, for the most part, in the majority of the video and talking us directly about all of the stuff that he's putting into this ultimate version of it, is really exciting, is that the new title is building on the Wii U version, but it's going to be its own game. But the major announcement that every character previously featured in a Smash game is going to be in this game, including Toon Link and Young Link, mirror characters, everybody. Is really exciting. They, of course, announced 2 new characters. One we knew about, which was the Squid Kids, and then the newest new announcement, which is, of course, Ridley from Metroid, getting to be a playable character
finally
in the new game, with a really brutal trailer of him like kicking Mario off a ledge and impaling Mega Man. Like, it was really intense. They
got a brutal moveset, yeah.
Yeah, they leaned into the Metroid feel, and they didn't kind of kiddieify it just to. It's still Nintendo, so there's no blood or anything, but like they really gave the intensity of the Metroid games. They also announced new assist trophies, like Bomberman's going to be an assist trophy. They're going to be new Pokemon in the game as well. And Midna's going to be an assist trophy as well. So like they really dove really deep, and they allowed you to really get wrapped up in it. New stages. They announced that there will be GameCube controller support, which is like the most culty thing about Smash
Smash
Brothers.
Brothers in general, yeah.
So yeah, and which made me very excited. I love the Smash Brothers series. Also the fact, and this is a small detail that not a lot of people are talking about, but that I really like. Sakurai said it is likely that we will have very few characters to start the game. Maybe just the same characters who were in the original N64 version unlocked
Oh
to
yeah, the
start,
original 8, yeah.
and then you have to unlock the rest. And I think that's great. I don't see it as a problem because you need a reason to play the game. And in the Wii U version, you had a lot of the characters. There were still plenty to unlock, but like putting stuff behind unlockables, giving you a goal to play the game over and over again, which I would do anyway, I think is a really smart idea.
And I think, and well, in a lot of the old unlocks, I remember unlocking everything in Melee way back when, and it wasn't like, okay, you need to beat 25 guys on this stage at this difficulty. A lot of it was play this many hours multiplayer.
Or win this many matches or something.
Yeah, and it was the kind of thing of, okay, for every hour 4 people are playing, that's 4 hours, so 100 hours is really 25 hours playing. And like we didn't put that in a weekend, and so we're unlocking characters left and right. And I think one of the difficult things about the Switch is there are new iterations of things within a franchise that it's like we've gotten Mario Kart 8 Ultimate. We've gotten Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. We've gotten Pokken Tournament. We've gotten Hyrule Warriors Ultimate. We've gotten Captain Toad Treasure Tracker. A lot of, hey, we know the Wii U didn't do so well, so you guys didn't get this game. Here it is, maybe with an extra bell or another whistle. And I've definitely spoken with friends of mine who are fellow Wii U owners who are now also Switch owners, and like, yeah, I get why they're doing it, but I'm feeling a little burned here. And some of them believe that Smash Bros. Ultimate is really just a port, which the difficulty in this is you can say one sequel is a sequel if they've taken out characters. But if you're just throwing everybody in there, it's like, well, it's a port. Well, they're building on the features and they're adding this and the gameplay's differently. Yeah, they're just rebalancing it. It's really just a port of the Wii U version. Yes, but they're also adding this. I don't know. It's just a port of the Wii U version. And I think if they build it so that it starts with the original 8 characters and there is an emphasis on the evolution of Smash.
Yeah.
Or something within the single-player version, single-player campaign, or anything like that, to differentiate it from Smash 4, I think that's really going to go a long way for people. I mean, like hell, we're not going to buy it.
Right.
But we'd like to feel better about it.
Right. Well, I think also Smash Ultimate reminds me of Mortal Kombat Trilogy back in the day on PlayStation, because that was essentially Mortal Kombat 3, but with the 2 characters from the previous 2 games rolled into it. It came out right on the heels of Mortal Kombat 3 Ultimate, which had extra characters. And so I get a sense of that. I mean, as a Switch owner who is not a Wii U owner, while I can see your saltiness, I also can't hear
You're benefiting from this shit.
Yeah, I can't hear you over the sound of how excited I am that all these games that I missed I get to play now. So, I totally get that perspective. I think
Oh yeah.
I think ultimately Nintendo wins for me for a lot of reasons. Obviously, we're Nintendo fanboys here, which is not a secret, but Reggie Fils-Aimé is one of the most charismatic executives I've seen. He just knows how to talk to his audience. He knows how to engage with gamers. He is a gamer. He was also on the most recent episode of the Nintendo Power podcast where they talked about E3 stuff, and he was great. Like, he's got a good sense of humor, and he's just a fun person to listen to talk. So
He's consistently solid.
yeah, and so I don't think I'll ever not enjoy a Nintendo press conference, even if I'm not super excited, because he's got such charisma. But that said, these are all the major conferences that happened. These were our thoughts on them. I think for me, Nintendo was my favorite. But again, I think it's because they're kind of bucking the trend of dropping everything for E3 and blowing it out and just continuing to do what they've been doing with the Switch, and be solid, be direct, give us what we want, and move forward. And so I think that's ultimately going to continue to serve them well. I think that this trend of trying to make it an event is going to slowly start to go away. More and more of these things are for the people online and not for the people on the show floor, considering there's so much access to it now. And so I think the inevitable future of E3 is definitely going to be guided more towards the web user and having, less theater or live experience focused stuff, which could be for better or for worse.
I would even argue if the concept of E3 were to dissolve in the next 5 years, I don't think I'd be that upset. I wouldn't be that heartbroken. It definitely had it's been very useful. It's been very powerful. It's had some great moments, some highs and some lows, which are both great moments. And I agree that the Nintendo Direct was probably my favorite segment of E3, if only because they did such a great job of showing why they don't need E3.
Yeah.
They just continued doing what they were doing and put forth a great showcase anyway. Any of these studios, any of these publishers can invite the press to play their games. There's already articles being written about this stuff. This is just sort of a packing it into a weekend. It's a San Diego Comic-Con kind of thing, but it's not as big as that, and it's not as far-reaching as that. It's not like we have dozens and dozens of little conferences happening over the weekend that you can't, you couldn't possibly stream them all, so you need the press to cover it. It's just a couple of big showcases. And they've got the technology. They've got everything they need. I honestly kind of, and look, it might be a short-sighted thing, but I kind of argue we don't really need E3.
Now, again, one thing to remember is neither Geoff or I work in the industry,
We don't.
but we do know that a ton of our friends in the cartridge blowers group that we're a part of are and did go to E3. And so if you're listening to this, I would love for you guys to post on our page telling us about what the experience is like on the show floor and in the conferences, and if it felt very different for you being there live. Because again, we are watching it on the web and it's not curated for us, so those experiences will fall flat, where in person they may not be.
And reading previews about these things based on E3, again, to our eyes and to our vantage point, don't seem much different than any other preview written about these games, than demo copies, than anything else. Like, really, the major difference is how long of a line did you wait on? Or what did the booth look like when you got there? Again, it's window dressing, which, like I was saying about the music, can help and can have an effect. But at the end of the day, they're side details. Like, what is the difference? I would love to be proven wrong, please.
And now, of course, talking to the rest of our listeners who are not industry professionals, how do you feel about E3? As a fan like me and Geoff, do you feel like it's overwhelming? Do you feel like it's not enough, too much? Like, I'm always curious to know. For me, I often feel overwhelmed by E3, and I'm always following up after Nintendo. The Nintendo Direct is the only thing I watched live, but again, I love my Switch most at this moment. I'm the most infatuated with it, so I'm most excited to find out stuff about it. That's just a personal bias. But what was your feeling on E3 this year, or E3 in general? And let us know in the comments or on email. We're always curious to hear, or on Twitter, which is where we get most of our responses. We're always curious to hear how you feel about it, because again, talking to my friends about what the announcements were and stuff is exciting. But beyond that, again, how does it feel being a citizen of the internet watching E3? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Or are you somewhere in between?
We want to hear your highs and your lows, your favorites and least favorites. Again, we're sharing our opinions and our experiences, and we want to hear yours too.
Of course, check out the other podcasts on Certain Point of View, which is the network we're a part of. Another Pass with Case Aiken, Scruffy Nerf Herders, and of course, the flagship Certain Point of View podcast, which is a Star Wars review and discussion podcast. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, YouTube, Instagram, though that's not been very active, and of course our email, funandgamespod@gmail.com. We always love hearing from you guys. Thank you as always for listening. Like, subscribe, rate, and review, all of that.
Yes, thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. Thank you for being part of our wild ride through all of this. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Geoff Moonen.
And I'm Matt, a.k.a. Stormageddon.
And happy gaming.